Okay, I want you to imagine something for a moment. Picture your mind as a house. You know, it's your sanctuary. It's where you keep everything that makes you you, your memories, your sense of self, your whole idea of what's real. Now imagine someone gets inside that house and they don't steal anything. Instead, they start rearranging the furniture. They tell you that blue sofa you've always had was actually red. And they keep telling you day after day until you're so exhausted you look at that sofa and you actually start to see red.
It's a terrifying image. It really is. It sounds like something out of a psychological thriller, right?
Yeah.
But what you're describing is, well, it's a very real mechanism of a coerced, internalized false confession. It's one of the most disturbing things the human brain can be made to do.
And that's exactly where we're going today. We are opening the files on the Birgitte Tengs case. This is widely considered one of Norway's most controversial miscarriages of justice. I've got a pile of sources here, court documents, investigation reports, and honestly, it reads less like a legal case and more like a tragedy about how easily truth can be, well, manufactured.
It is a tragedy. And our mission in this deep dive is to really unpack the mechanics of it. How a 17-year-old boy was manipulated into confessing to murdering his own cousin, the tunnel vision that just blinded an entire investigation, and the 20-year fight it took to undo it all.
Yeah, and just to set the stage here, the sources are comparing this systemic failure to the Baneya case, which, as we know, is this huge dark stain on Norwegian legal history. This isn't just one mistake, it's a whole system failing. So let's go back, let's orient ourselves. May 6th, 1995. Karmøy, Norway.
You have to understand what Karmøy was like in the mid-90s.
Yeah.
It's a very tight-knit coastal community, the kind of place where, people feel safe. There's this pervasive sense of security.
A security that just evaporated overnight.
Completely. Because on that date, Birgitte Tengs, who was only 17, was found murdered.
She was found on a remote gravel road near Kopervik. She'd been walking home alone from a party.
And the details they're harrowing. The sources describe extreme violence. She had been sexually assaulted, strangled, beaten. I mean, it was a brutal, chaotic attack.
And when something that horrific happens in a place that feels so safe, the reaction isn't just sadness, is it? It's panic.
It's absolute panic.
Yeah.
The community went from secure to hunted almost overnight. And that panic creates immense pressure on the police. The public wanted a monster caught, and they wanted it done yesterday.
And that's the environment where mistakes get made, right? The pressure cooker.
It's the perfect breeding ground for what our sources call tunnel vision. The investigators were desperate for a resolution. And when you're that desperate, you can stop looking to the truth and start looking for a suspect who just fits.
Which brings us to the person they zeroed in on, Birgitte's own cousin. In the documents, he's just the cousin, or Fettern, also 17 at the time. But looking at his profile in these reports, I'm scratching my head. He doesn't fit the killer profile at all.
No, not even close. On paper, he was a ghost. No criminal record, no history of violence, no drug problems. Just a normal teenager. There were absolutely no red flags.
So why him? If he's just a normal kid, why did they lock onto him so tightly? Was it just the family connection?
It seems to add on that, plus just proximity. He was there, he was family. But the sources all point to this critical error, confirmation bias. Once the police decided the cousin did it, every single piece of information was filtered through that lens.
So they were working backward from the conclusion.
Exactly. They just ignored other leads. The sources mentioned reports of unknown cars in the area, even a known sexual ender operating nearby. But investigating those leads, well, that takes time, and it might prove their theory wrong. So they just set them aside. They needed the cousin to be the one.
But they had a huge problem. No physical evidence.
None. No DNA, no fingerprints, no weapon, nothing. They had a theory, but no proof. And if you don't have physical evidence, you need the next best thing.
A confession.
The confession.
And this is where the story gets really, really disturbing. The interrogation. This wasn't just a few tough hours in a room. This was something else entirely.
It was. A psychological dismantling. The police brought in a psychologist, a man named Gisel Berge Stive. And the methods he used are now seen as incredibly controversial.
I saw the term facilitated communication in the reports. It sounds so benign,
It sounds therapeutic, but in this context, the sources suggest it was dangerous. Stive wasn't just asking questions. He was using leading techniques, almost like hypnosis. He wasn't asking, did you do this? He was telling him, we know you did this. You've just blocked out the memory. Let me help you find it.
That's incredibly manipulative. You take a 17-year-old kid, you isolate him, you put him in a room, and you tell him he's crazy for not remembering a murder.
And it went on and on. He was subjected to 23 interrogations.
23.
23. He was sleep-deprived, terrified, and totally alone with these authority figures. An adolescent brain under that kind of stress is it's incredibly suggestible.
It's the red sofa analogy. You tell him enough times that he did it, and he starts to believe it, maybe just to make it all stop.
And that's what happened. He broke. He confessed. But, and this is the crucial part, the confession he gave was wrong.
Right. This part made me say what out loud. The details he remembered didn't match the crime scene at all.
This is the classic sign of a false confession. In his story, which he was basically inventing to please them, he claimed he tied Birgitte with a rope and used a knife. He was very specific about these recovered memories.
But the police knew. They knew there was no rope at the scene, and the autopsy showed absolutely no knife wounds.
Zero. It was a complete fabrication. He was just guessing. He was creating a fantasy of what he thought they wanted to hear. The sources call it a clear case of false memories. It wasn't even lying, really. He'd been manipulated into believing a story that never happened.
You'd think that would be it, though. If a confession doesn't match the facts, it's garbage, right? Why didn't they stop?
That tunnel vision again. The investigators just rationalized it. They probably thought, well, he's confused on the details because of the trauma, but the core guilt is real. They cherry-picked what they wanted to hear.
So they take this completely flawed, manufactured confession to trial.
They do. In 1997, Hagelin District Court. The prosecution's case was almost entirely the confession. The defense pointed out the lack of DNA, the missing rope, the phantom knife. But the story was just too powerful. The jury convicted him. 14 years.
14 years for a crime he didn't commit based on a memory planted in his head. But then the legal system had a moment of whiplash.
It was a roller coaster. It goes to the Glading Court of Appeal in 1998. And this time, the jury looks closer at the lack of physical evidence, at the interrogation tactics, and they vote to acquit him of the criminal charges.
Okay, so acquitted, he's innocent, he walks free, nightmare over.
You'd think so. But this is where the sources introduce this concept they call justice moored light.
Miscarriage of justice light. That sounds so bizarre. How do you have a diet version of that?
It's a paradox of the Norwegian legal system. So in the criminal court, the standard is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The jury decided there was doubt. But right after that, there was a civil suit for compensation to the family.
And the burden of proof is lower there.
Much lower. It's just preponderance of the evidence is more likely than not. And so the same judges who saw him acquitted criminally then ordered him to pay 100,000 NOK in compensation to Birgitte's parents.
Wait, hold on. So the court says, we can't prove you killed her, you're free to go, but we think you probably did, so you have to pay the family.
That is exactly what happened. And it was devastating. It effectively branded him a murderer in the eyes of the public. He was technically free, but he carried this official stamp of guilt.
That's incredibly messed up.
Yeah.
They gave him back his freedom, but they stole his innocence.
A profound injustice. And there's a tragic side note here about the interrogator, Birgitte Tengs. The sources mention he took his own life in 1998, shortly after the acquittal.
Wow.
Yeah. The sources don't speculate on the exact reasons, but it just shows the immense pressure and the ripple effects of this case. The system didn't just break the suspect. It chewed up everyone involved.
So what about the cousin? He's out of prison, but he's branded a killer. What did the next 2 decades look like for him?
A living nightmare. I mean, first he spent almost 2 years in custody, often in isolation, bullied by other inmates. He's just a kid.
And when he gets out, he can't just go back to his old life.
No. That stigma followed him everywhere. Severe PTSD, depression, social isolation. I mean, imagine trying to get a job or make a friend when everyone in your country thinks you're a monster who got off on a technicality. The sources call it a systemic cruelty. He lived in that limbo for over 25 years.
25 years, a whole lifetime.
It is. And he and his family, they never gave up. They were fighting the whole time to get the case reopened, to clear his name. But the state just wouldn't budge.
It really shows how stubborn institutions can be. Admitting a mistake of this size means admitting the system itself is broken.
And that's the hardest thing for a bureaucracy to do. It wasn't until 2019 that things finally changed. And it wasn't a change of heart. It was a change in technology.
DNA.
Cold case DNA technology. They could re-examine biological samples from 1995 with methods that just didn't exist back then.
And the DNA didn't point to the cousin.
Not at all. It pointed away from him entirely. It pointed to another man, Johnny Vasbak, a man in his 50s whose profile, unlike the cousins, was actually consistent with this kind of crime.
So Vasbak was charged in 2022.
He was. And to be precise, he was convicted in the lower court. But later, in 2023, he was acquitted on appeal because the DNA evidence alone was deemed insufficient for a criminal conviction.
But, and this is the crucial part for our story, regardless of Vastback's status, the investigation did something huge for the cousin.
It did. It definitively cleared him.
Yeah.
The evidence made it impossible for the cousin to have been involved. So in 2023, the Criminal Cases Review Commission formally declared him innocent. The civil judgment was finally overturned.
And he was awarded compensation, 4.3 million NOK, which sounds like a lot.
It is, but the sources make a really poignant point about this, that money pays for lost income and time served. But what's the exchange rate for a stolen youth? How do you put a price on 25 years of trauma?
You can't. It's transactional. Here's a check. Sorry, we ruined your life.
Exactly. It's the difference between compensation and actual justice. Justice would have been a competent investigation from the start.
Which brings us to the broader critique in our sources. They don't see this as a one-off. They connect it directly to other scandals, like Baniheo.
The parallels are striking. A disturbing pattern of police suppressing evidence that doesn't fit their narrative, manipulating young suspects, and this institutional arrogance. This refusal to admit error until it's absolutely undeniable.
The sources use a really powerful literary reference. They call the people in the system evil's hirelings.
On Skepin's High Raid. It's from a novel by Jens Bjørneboe. And it describes a system that crushes individuals not out of pure malice, but to protect its own reputation. The prosecutors, the police chiefs, they become hirelings of a systemic evil because they prioritize the institution over the individual.
That's a chilling idea, that the system isn't always designed to find truth, but to close cases and look competent.
And in high-pressure cases, our sources argue truth can become secondary to closure. The community wanted a culprit. The police gave him one. The court stamped it. And everyone got to feel safe again, except the 17-year-old boy in the cell.
So if we step back, what's the big takeaway here? Why should we care about this case from 1995?
Because the psychology is universal. We're all susceptible to confirmation bias. We all want easy answers to scary problems. But when you give that very human flaw the power of the state, it becomes a weapon.
It's a reminder that a confession isn't always the truth. We assume, why would anyone confess to something they didn't do? But we just underestimate the power of isolation and authority.
Exactly. You take a scared kid, deprive him of sleep, and tell him for weeks he's a monster. He just might start to believe you. This case teaches us we have to be vigilant. We have to demand that police work is based on evidence, not a story they want to be true.
As we wrap this up, we've gone from a horrific crime to a coerced confession, through this legal limbo, and finally to a vindication that took decades. It's a tragedy with a resolution, but not a happy ending.
No, not happy. Necessary. But the scars are still there.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. The cousin was eventually paid. The system wrote a check. But nowhere in these sources do I see any mention of individuals being punished for those interrogation methods. I see no real consequences for the people who pushed this false narrative.
That's the lingering silence in the files, isn't it?
It is. In a system designed to protect us, who protects us from the protectors when they get it wrong? Who holds the system accountable when it destroys a life just to save face?
That's the question we should all be asking.
Thanks for listening to this deep dive. Stay curious and keep questioning.